Today we're going to take a look at Massive X, the follow-up to one of our most successful instruments ever, Massive. There's so much you could go into with Massive X, but rather than jumping down the rabbit hole, I give you an overview of the main parts of the synth, explain a little about how they work, and give you an idea of how they sound. As you can see, there are two parts to Massive X. The top half is where the sound is generated, and the bottom half is where you find modulation, voicing, and routing. First off, we have the dual wavetable oscillators. There are loads of wavetables to choose from the basics you'd expect to some seriously unique ones. We even remastered some all-time favorites from the first Massive for those of you who want some old-school flavor. You can change the wavetable position here, change the level here, and the pitch here. Here we have the oscillator modes. This is where things get interesting. They determine how the wavetable is read and produce wildly different results. They each have their own submodes too. So right now, the oscillator is reading the growl wavetable from front to back. But I can take my wavetable and feed it to the gorilla mode and even choose which type of gorilla I want to feed it to. So here, King, Kang and Kong are the submodes, each with their own character. And with the gorillas, I can even choose how many I want to have. You might have noticed that the two parameters here change with each mode. These can be used to further sculpt your sound. And the two phase modulation oscillators here can be used to inject further variation right at the sound source. You can also do this with the aux bus. Of course, all of this can be modulated. And those of you who know the original Massive will recognize the drag and drop workflow and Saturn rings here. So I can drag and drop an LFO to the modulation slot for the wavetable position and start modulating it. The Saturn ring shows the amount of modulation. The noise modules here are great for adding texture or for experimental sound design. Again, there are loads to choose from traditional colored noises to real-world sources. These really come into their own when you route them in creative ways. Let's take a look at the filter section. These range from the more utility-focused SV filters to filters like the Asimov and the Groyan, which have their own very unique characters. You can choose different modes here, and each has its own additional parameters for tweaking or for using with modulation. Next up are the insert effects. You can actually patch these anywhere you like in the signal chain. There are things like a bit crusher, distortion and a frequency shifter, which are good for experimentation, as well as effects like the correction filter and VCA tools, which let you more precisely adjust your sound. One of the coolest things here is the ability to insert extra oscillators using these slots. I can choose a sine, saw, or a pulse wave and put it anywhere in the signal chain. You can also add ring and phase modulation oscillators if you like. The stereo effects here help to finish your sound. You will find some of the usual suspects like the reverb, delay and phaser, although they've been developed for real high fidelity and are super tweakable. There are also some less common effects in here, like the amp and speaker simulator, for example. In the routing section, you can choose whether to use these in series, parallel, or a mix of the two. In the routing section, Massive X lets you connect any input to any output with a couple of clicks. It's super easy to create complex routings and produce some pretty extreme results. There are also two modulation inputs here, so it's possible to use things like LFOs or envelopes to excite certain filters. The voicing tab here gives you an overview of Massive X's sound engine. You can access things like polyphonic or monophonic settings, tuning, and oscillator behavior. This bit over here is the Unison voicing section. It's a super powerful tool for adding voice variation to your patch and injecting real musicality. You can do everything from minute choir-style tonal deviations for a wider sound, to the detuning you use for a supersaw, to chords and scales using the harmonizer. You can also crossfade between the two and modulate these like any other parameter. When it comes to selecting a modulation source, as you'd expect, there's more than enough to go around. Down here we have the modulation sources. 3 performers, 9 slots for envelopes or LFOs, 4 Keytrackers, and finally, a voice randomizer. Like in the original Massive, I just drag and drop modulation to the parameter I want to modulate and determine how much it modulates with the Saturn ring. I could spend ages going into each of these, so we'll save the details for another video and just take a quick look at what they can do. The 3 performers let you draw up to 8 bars of modulation to assign to a parameter. To get more control over these performers, I can hit this button here to open the remote octave editor. This lets me choose an octave on my keyboard to control the performers and assign snapshots to each of a key, meaning I can play notes and control modulation at the same time with my keyboard. Next up, envelopes and LFOs. Everybody needs these, and in Massive X you have 9 of them. They're a little different to what you might expect because you can really dial them in, from their shape to hold stages, velocities, and more. The switcher LFO is a really nice take on an LFO, and you can do things like modulate the switcher from another source to change its shape over time. There's also an exciter envelope and random LFO to choose from. Here we have the trackers. They are basically key tracking modulation, but way more complex. I can do the normal stuff, like opening the filter cutoff at higher notes with linear curves, or I can go in note by note and really change the sound between individual keys. There are a few different modes and, like the performers, different ways of drawing the modulation. Last but not least, there's the voice randomizer. This adds randomized modulation to any destination. It's good for analog-style sounds to emulate drifting in the oscillators, filters and pitch, as well as for more extreme chance variation when you crank it up. Lastly, at the top here you see 16 macro controls, which you can assign to any parameter in Massive X. These also act as the route for automating the synth in your DAW. That's it for this walkthrough. I hope you enjoyed it. If you don't have Massive X yet, you can download the free demo on our website and check it out for yourself. You'll find the link in the description. Be inspired, go create. Thanks for watching.